Not about the results per se of the election last night in Indiana, but I do want to talk about the consequences for the United States Senate of the loss of Senator Lugar as of next year, and particularly for the Foreign Relations Committee. It's no secret that Dick Lugar's loss last night is going to be particularly felt by all of us who've had the privilege of working with him on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And that's whether he was the chairman of the committee, and I've served under him when he was chairman, or whether he's been a member of the committee and the ranking member as he is now, and as I'm privileged to serve with him. Whether you agreed with him or not, whether he had the gavel or whether he didn't have the gavel, Dick Lugar had an approach to the Senate and to governing that was always the same. He was serious, he was thoughtful, and he refused to allow this march to an orthodoxy about ideology and partisan politics to get in the way of what he thought was the responsibility of a senator, and indeed the need of the country to have people come together and find the common ground. He dug deeply into some of foreign policy's most vexing issues, and his expertise on complicated issues that were honed over 36 years really can't be replicated. That's something we're going to lose. The institutional experience, the judgment, and the wisdom of the approach on some of those issues, the constitutional questions that he would call into account when no one else would, the questions of not being stampeded by popular opinion with respect to the use of force in one instance or another. All of those are essential to making this institution live up to its full capacity. Already since last night's news, we've been hearing again and again on some of the news shows and elsewhere about the senator from Indiana's work on nuclear nonproliferation. And it's no secret that his non-Lugar efforts have become almost shorthand for bipartisanship in foreign policy, and they should be recognized. But I want to emphasize here now, that's not all that Senator Lugar contributed to this field of foreign policy. He's a leading expert on some of the urgent issues that are off the beaten path, from food security, the eradication of hunger worldwide, his work with Joe Biden, and then his work, I'm privileged to say, with me to try to change the relationship with Pakistan and to help prevent their economy from unraveling, to help to encourage them to cooperate with interests that were vital to America and indeed to the stability of that region, to establish what he called a deeper, broader, long-term strategic engagement in Pakistan. I'm privileged to say, Mr. President, for me, the personal journey with Dick Lugar began before that, and I think it epitomizes some of who he is and why he'll be missed here. It has nothing to do with ideology. Back in 1980s, shortly after I came here, I was elected in 1984, and I started on the Foreign Relations Committee in 1985. Right away, we began to work together on the issue of the Philippines, of free and fair elections in the Philippines. And I had traveled over there a number of times as a freshman senator. I had met with Ferdinand Marcos. I was concerned about the torture taking place and the political prisoners and other violations of rights, and yet we were sort of aiding them, notwithstanding our values and our standards. Well, Dick Lugar joined with me in that effort. Didn't have any reason to join with a, freshly minted senator, wet behind the ears, but he did. And together we sort of became a team that started to focus on the Philippines and figure out how do we hold Marcos accountable. And he was serious and he was fair-minded. And I saw firsthand during our trip to the Philippines, which we made at the time of the election, after we'd done a whole lot of groundwork to set up an accountability system for that election, that he had a very personal and special understanding of what the United States meant to the rest of the world with respect to our values. And that cause animated this man who we all know is dignified and reserved and humble, but who proudly came back and recounted with some animation to President Reagan the difference that the United States of America makes when it gives voice to people's aspirations for freedom, and in this case, particularly the people of the Philippines. The fact is that it was that discussion with Ronald Reagan and the results that came out of the accountability in that election that forced Ferdinand Marcos to leave, saw Cory Aquino come to power, and the Philippines move back into genuine democracy. I saw the same commitment with Senator Lugar a number of times over the years, but never more so than last year when we worked together on the New START Treaty. That was 2 years ago, I guess now. His wisdom and his patience was invaluable in laying out the case, but particularly in building support across the aisle so that we could find the path to 71 votes. And I said then, and I say it again today, given the bitter, divisive, partisan, continual political squabbling that seems to dominate the life in this city today, 71 votes is probably the equivalent of the 98 votes we used to get on those kinds of efforts. And so I'm grateful to him for his willingness to work to do that. He worked to give members more time to work through problems, to find a way to solve individual objections. And it reminded me of the way you actually work in what is now sometimes, unfortunately, sarcastically referred to as the world's greatest deliberative body. He deliberated, and he helped us deliberate. And I thought it was one of the finer and prouder moments of the Senate in recent years. Mr. President, I am confident that Dick Lugar's record on our committee is going to be one of those that's remembered for a long time. Sadly, last night, it is remembered in the context of Senator Fulbright, who also came to lose a primary in the end and paid a high price for his concern about global affairs and his involvement with those issues. But I think that he's also remembered significantly today for the enormous legacy that he built about American foreign policy and how you make our country stronger. Dick Lugar does that, and I think he's made it clear. I mean, there's no doubt in the mind of anybody on our side of the aisle that Dick Lugar is a conservative. And his votes through the years have shown that. He's a proud Republican. But I think probably because he served as a mayor before he came here, he applied what we call the LaGuardia rule to foreign policy, which is the rule that Fiorello LaGuardia applied to doing things in New York. So it didn't matter, whether you were Republican or Democrat, as long as the streets got clean, the potholes got filled, and they didn't have any labels on them. And that's pretty much the way the foreign policy ought to be. It used to be under Arthur Vandenberg that we said that politics ends at the water's edge, and we do what's in the best interest of our country. Only in the last years here in the Senate have I seen a complete diversion from that, where, unfortunately, and it's been true on both sides, that politics has entered into the choices people have made with respect to major issues of conflict, potential war and peace, and interests of the security of our country. So, about 4 years ago this time, Dick Lugar received the Paul Douglas Award just off the Senate floor over in the Mansfield room. And he summed up his approach to the Senate. And I think after last night, it's important for all of our colleagues to be mindful of his words and to think about them as we go forward in these next 6, 7, 8 months. Dick argued that bipartisanship isn't an end in itself. And it's sometimes mistaken for centrism and compromise, when in fact, it's really the way that what he called being a constructive public servant. It's the way a constructive public servant approaches his or her job, with self-reflection, discipline, and faith in the goodwill of others. He said, particularly destructive is the misperception in some quarters that governing with one vote more than 50% is just as good or better than government with 60 or 70% support. The problem with this thinking, he said, is that whatever is won today through division is usually lost tomorrow. The relationships that are destroyed and the ill will that is created to make subsequent achievements that much more difficult. A 51% mentality deepens cynicism, sharpens political vendettas, and depletes the national reserve of goodwill that is critical to our survival in hard times. Now, that's actually about as fundamentally, philosophically, as conservative, I think, as you could ask for. Now, I think every one of us who has seen the difficulty of the last few years of our politics here, who have been frustrated by the sheer inability of the institution to work, would agree that there's nothing liberal or conservative or moderate about what Dick said. It's just common sense about how human nature works, about how people work. Now, Mr. President, it seems to me that we would do well to get back in touch. I often hear people talk about how we need to change the rules here in order to get something done. Actually, we don't. These are the same rules that we operated with when Everett Dirksen was here, when Bob Dole was leader, George Mitchell was leader, but we got things done. In the 1990s, we balanced the budget of our nation 4 times in a row without a constitutional amendment. It didn't take a piece of paper to tell us to do it, or new words written in the Constitution. It took the common sense and courage of people on the floor of the Senate to do what was right. We don't have to change the rules, we have to change the thinking, or change the people who don't want to do it. But every great moment of this institution, when people look back in history with pride and point to the Missouri Compromise or point to Henry Clay or Daniel Webster, all these great senators, or Ted Kennedy more recently, and others on the other side of the aisle. When they do that, they're talking about people who operated by the same rules but found the common ground because they had the intelligence and willpower to put the country and its interests ahead of everything else. So that's what Dick Lugar's loss last night means to us. I don't know who will replace him. We don't know. We certainly know the cross currents of some of the campaign. And we certainly know what Senator Lugar himself chose to say last night about his opponent's quest for more partisanship, not less. So the alarm bells have been sounded, I think. And my prayer is that this election this year is going to help purge this country of this incredible waste of opportunity that we are living through here. Now, this Congress isn't over. And for those of us who were here and remember 1996, it bears repeating that even in presidential years, the Congress can actually defy conventional wisdom and get some things done. And that's why I know that Dick Lugar is going to finish out his 6th term in the Senate with the same determination and effectiveness that has marked every year of his service here. And he's going to have a lot more contributions to this institution that he reveres and I think that respects him so enormously. Thank you, Mr. President.